Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm political analyst and raconteur Al Spry. We have the venerable Phyllis Schlafly on, and she's going to talk about why we're pretty screwed right now.
A political icon. She's been at this for more than 50 years. And we're most anxious to hear what she has to say after all of these years. So if you'll pull up a chair, stay put. The Florida Roundtable begins following these messages. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks and in the Orlando area on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm political analyst Al Spry. It's so great to be here on 80 stations and Florida News Network and also on Tough TV on the Tough TV Network, Tough TV 38.
Absolutely.
We're on 3 times a week because they cannot get enough of us. Will Strickler says we don't want him on once or twice. We want him on 3 times. Wednesday mornings at 9, Saturday mornings at 9, and Sunday mornings at 9. And, of course, a shout-out, of course, to all those wonderful folks at the Tough TV Network. And we love you all. So check them out at Tough TV 38 over the air on Channel 38, digital quality, and, of course, on selected cable companies. And if you want to see your Tough TV, just call your cable operator or satellite operator and say, enough. Enough of this nonsense. I want my Tough TV, or I'm going to come down there, and who knows what will happen.
All right.
The winner of the week
It did.
is the Foundation for Excellence in Education. This is, of course, Florida politics. The profile of Jeb Bush's Education Foundation could well have diminished after the former governor stepped down to focus on the presidency. He named former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice to serve as the new chairman, however, and that should help ensure that doesn't happen. So this is very interesting. We got Condi Rice back in the mix, of course. I'm not a fan of her, by the way. And it's that establishment thing, Reagan. It's that Common Core thing.
Vice President Condi Rice? Or another round as the Secretary of State.
No more Condi Rice. No more Condi Rice. No more Rumsfeld. No more Darth Vader. You know, another winner of the week. We got 2 of them. Okay. Politico. And by the way, you know who Darth Vader is.
Yes.
You're the guy you interview. Politico, the Beltway political outlet, took a huge step into Florida, smartly hiring ace reporter Mark Caputo from the Miami Herald to lead its Florida coverage. Loser of the week, Rick Scott. Sometimes he wins and sometimes he loses. This week he lost.
Okay.
His fellow Republicans on the Florida cabinet are now speaking out about his handling of the FDLE. The scandal has spread from the Tampa Bay Times, I should say, the Miami Herald, to the front page of other Florida newspapers, and is overshadowing most everything he does and says lately. What's the FDLE, Reagan?
The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, whose longtime director, appointed by Jeb Bush, and very popular man, was forced out. Let me, I want to take a minute here, Al. The Orlando Sentinel, Sunday, January 25th.
The funny papers.
The funny pages. Doonesbury by Gary Trudeau.
That one's been around a long time.
And I'm going to read first frame. Hi, folks. As you can imagine, there's been much excitement here in our shop ever since we heard Jeb Bush was exploring a presidential bid. It goes on. Why? Well, like most explorers, Jeb sets out a lot of baggage, and unpacking Bush family baggage is what Doonesbury does. In fact, Doonesbury has specialized in Bush busting since day one. Yes, from Junior's branding of frat pledges to Neil's SNL scandal to Poppy's wimp problem to W's train wreck of a presidency, Doonesbury has been calling out the Bushes for nearly half a century. And as 2016 approaches, you, the comedy consumer, will find lots of anti-Bush snark across a variety of platforms, but none has the commitment and experience of Doonesbury. So stay with Doonesbury, folks. Since 1967, the most trusted name in bushwhacking.
Yes. and that's where we'd agree with Doonesbury, which is more of a liberal comic. And but
it is.
As you and I being libertarians, we're going to be bashing some Bush too. So stay with Florida Roundtable as we do that, because neither one of us are big fans of that particular family. Neither are we big fans of the Clintons.
Well, that's right. And our special guest today is going to explore some of that with us. Phyllis Schlafly, in her 90th year, has got an expanded edition of A Choice, Not an Echo out, and she'll tell us why Jeb Bush needs to be stopped. So you want to stick around for that. Let us remind you that this is the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm your pal Al.
And we will be joined by political icon Phyllis Schlafly when the conversation continues. We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And Al, as promised, we are joined at this point in the program by a political icon, if you will, and I don't think that word is too strong for our guest today.
No, I don't either.
Phyllis Schlafly is with us, a constitutional lawyer, conservative activist, author, founder of the Eagle Forum. And Phyllis, it is an honor to have you with us. You have updated and expanded the 50th anniversary of your marvelous book, A Choice, Not an Echo. Welcome to the Florida Roundtable.
Well, thanks so much. Hi, Reagan. Hi, Al.
It's great to have you, Phyllis. I wanted to kick things off with, why do you feel that your book, of course it was written some 50 years ago, is still important today and needs to be reissued?
Well, it's important because, first of all, it invented the conservative movement. I sold 3 million copies out of my garage, and everybody read it. And what it did was to show the shenanigans of what we then called the kingmakers, or the Rockefeller Republicans, who wanted to control the Republican Party and dictate the nominee. And a lot has happened since 1964. Of course, we didn't get Goldwater elected, but we got our reward in 1980 when we elected Ronald Reagan. But then a lot has happened since then, and the book is designed with a chapter on each convention. And the people we used to call the kingmakers, or the Rockefeller Republicans, we now call the establishment, or the rhinos. They're the big money people who want to dictate to the rest of us. And I guess I'm a grassroots person. I think the nominee should be selected by the delegates who are elected to the Republican National Convention.
But that's not the case nowadays. It seems like the game is rigged. We had Ron Paul on the show a few months ago, and he said he didn't have a chance because the game was rigged. What do you think he was talking about when he said that?
Well, you'll find a bit about that in my new book, A Choice, Not an Echo, which brings the story up to date. And, for example, I was there in the last convention when Romney was nominated, and there was no way that Ron Paul could have been nominated by that convention, but he did get about 1,000 votes. And the establishment and the Romney people were so small, they wouldn't even let his votes be recorded. And how did that hurt him? Hurt Romney. I just think that was so small. They tried to freeze Ron Paul out, and so he understands what the big guys are doing, and he wrote the foreword to my new revision. Well, revision isn't the right word. Extension of what's going on. In other words, I brought the establishment story up to date.
Right.
And they've been doing the same thing.
Well,
In fact, somebody stopped me in the grocery store and said, Phyllis, I read your new book, and it sounds like the last half of it is written by the same person who wrote the first half. Well, that's right. I did write it all.
Well, we trace this back. I mean, we're talking here coming out of World War II, after Herbert Hoover, but Tom Dewey and the Eisenhowers, and these are the folks. They called them the Eastern Establishment even then. And they pretty much have had their way, with the exception.
Right, and the attitude of the grassroots, as eloquently expressed by Everett Dirksen was, "We followed you before, and you led us down the road to defeat."
Well, I want to make the point that obviously the pivotal year of 1964, which led to the re-election of we consider a very evil man, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Reagan and I are firmly convinced that he was behind some nefarious plots, including the assassination of JFK and probably some other leaders as well. We had Roger Stone on, who's was a big Nixon operator, friend of Nixon's, and he was laying the dirt out. Johnson was, in our opinion, no different than a mafia don and operated the same way. I wanted to get your opinion of Johnson.
Well, he was an operator. I think who's this guy who's on the TV, a left-winger all the time, and he told that when he was a young guy, he watched Lyndon Johnson, and he would the guys who were in Congress just kept a room in Washington, and they lived in their home state. But Lyndon Johnson would take a half a dozen showers every morning, and he'd walk down to take the shower, and so he would get to know all the congressmen and be able to tell them what to do.
An incredible man, used his size, liked to intimidate people, and if you didn't cooperate with him, he just cut you off cold.
But if you want some real intrigue, my chapter on the 1980 convention is really most extraordinary, and I think it has information that doesn't appear anywhere else. And that was when it became clear that we were going to nominate Ronald Reagan, which the establishment did not want. And when that became clear, they tried a maneuver of trying to make Reagan take Ford as his vice president, who would really be a co-president. And this was all announced by Robert Cronkite from his skybox. And they wanted Ford because he reliably took his orders from Henry Kissinger. Mm-hmm. It could have been like a third world takeover of our government. And
amazing.
You need to read that chapter in particular.
Yes, it's very important. We talked a little bit about Ford and the deal that was made to bring him into the office and so forth. But I wanted to turn, if I may, to something that's been talked about recently a lot, bantered by talk hosts like Mark Levin, and that's the Article 5 convention push. And I know you just wrote an article not too long ago about it, and I wanted to have you tell folks about what exactly that is, the Article 5 convention, and why you're opposed to it.
Well, Article 5 does offer one other way of changing the Constitution, which is if I think it's 34 states will petition Congress to call a constitutional convention, then we'll have one. But it's a dumb idea because, as my late friend Warren Berger said, there's no way to control it. Once you have this convention called, they can do whatever they want. And if you've been to conventions, you know how the guy with the gavel can slam it down and call on the people he wants to. And I think that these people who are pushing this are people who think they're smarter than the Founding Fathers and can do a better job. And I just doubt that.
I was going to say the caliber and quality of people who would run such a thing, if in fact it was put together, doesn't measure up. They don't have the political or intellectual wherewithal.
No, they don't sound like James Madison and George Washington.
I think, we seem to have the opposite of that today. We seem to have a lot of folks who are just interested in ego aggrandizement and we had a gentleman on. Hey, Reagan, remember the guy who wrote speeches for Reagan and Bush?
Yes.
And I forgot his name, but he said that the Congress is the last vestiges of 17th century. What did he say? It was where they were princes and the aristocracy.
Yeah.
And he said that that's the modern aristocracy now is in the Congress. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Well, I don't know. I thought Obama thinks he's the imperial czar of our country, and he can do whatever he wants. Remember, he boasted that he has a phone and a I don't know what, and he thinks he can. If Congress doesn't do what he wants, he can just do it himself.
Presidential proclamation.
So I have every reason to think that if Congress called a constitutional convention, the Obama people would take it over.
And I have been saying this for a few years that I don't see much difference between Obama and George W. Bush. I see similar policies. I see similar, even though there's a veneer of difference. I see Bush started the imperial presidency and ruled by fiat, and then Obama continued it. And what scared me about Obama is that he uses the Espionage Act of 1917 more than any other president in history to silence the media and reporters. And that most people don't know.
Well, the media are just so enamored of Obama. I don't know whether they need any silencing because they just have been his greatest supporters all the time. And that's why it's so difficult to bring out the truth about Obama.
Well, why is it that he wants to silence reporters? That's the question. That's scary stuff.
Well, every now and then, some reporter's honest, and he tells what Obama's really doing. Oh, but the history of the real fight is in the Republican Party. These people who want to go third party, I invite them to move to Europe, where they have lots of third parties.
I think we have the wrong system here. If we had a parliamentary system, I think we would work much better. Sometimes I think this bilateral winner take all system is not the way to go.
Well, I don't think the European is the way to go. I think we have a better system if we stick to it. But that's the problem. And we just need to have people in office who respect the U.S. Constitution. And it's a good Constitution, and the Founding Fathers set it up for us, and it's what has enabled our country to grow and prosper, and it's the violations of the Constitution that has gotten us into lots of trouble.
Is there a way to get us back to following the Constitution?
Well, I think you've got to be willing to attack Obama and tell the country what he's really doing, and then you also have to realize that the fight is in the Republican Party. One of the purposes of the kingmakers or the establishment is to make really the parties alike on all major issues, and only different if you can point out some special corruption or something.
Right.
And we don't believe in that. We believe in the adversarial system, and the Republicans should offer a different policy from Obama. And, before the last election, Obama said, well, he wasn't on the ballot, but his policies were. Well, the American people responded. They said, no, we don't want him. But nevertheless, people are trying, the establishment is trying to make the parties very much alike in foreign policy and especially, and in taxes and spending. And we don't want that. We want a different policy, and that's why we voted in the largest Republican majority. And
Phyllis, I tell you what, we do have to pause here. We'll come back and explore a couple of those points, but let me remind everyone that they are listening to the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest today, and we are delighted to have her, Phyllis Schlafly. Her reissued Choice Not an Echo, updated, expanded, forward by Ron Paul from our friends at Reagan Publishing. If you'll stay put, we'll continue in a moment. From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area, we are seen 3 times a week on Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day is Phyllis Schlafly, political icon. her 50th anniversary edition, updated and expanded, A Choice, Not an Echo, a foreword by Ron Paul from our friends at Regnery Publishing, and we presume that it is available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. And Phyllis, it is an honor to have you with us today.
Well, thanks so much, and let's not forget my website, eagleforum.org, where you can get more information if you don't learn everything on this program.
Right.
We're going to try, though. I'd like to talk about the America pre 9/11 briefly and then post 9/11, because to me I'm seeing two different Americas, an implementation of policies that are robbing us of the Fourth Amendment protections that we've enjoyed since the founding of the country. The most interesting point, and I've been speaking about this for years, is why the Patriot Act was already written out before 9/11, and all they did was implement it several weeks after, with all these abrogations of our freedoms. If you want to chime in on that, we'd appreciate it. Your take on this.
Well, the Obama crowd, of course, he was well trained by Alinsky, and they try to really take over and infiltrate our ranks and make us happy with what they want to do, and I think they're bad news for our country.
You know, where do you see this going? Because we've had several guests on. They've talked about this proto-fascist state that we live in now, where corporations are in cahoots with the government, and we're seeing less and less freedoms. We're seeing more and more police. Some are describing it as a police state. We're seeing the government giving away tanks and other heavy equipment and artillery to local police forces in small towns and large. So why isn't anyone speaking up about this? To me, this is pretty scary stuff.
Well, it is, and if you stick with my website, you'll find I'm speaking up. But at any rate, one of the important things is I believe that the United States should maintain military superiority. And I don't mean just what's called a strong national defense. Mm-hmm. I mean we should be the biggest and the best and the strongest. Mm-hmm. And then other people, friend and foe, will respect us. Because around the rest of the world, all they really respect is power. And when we are superior, and I've put that word in the Republican platform again and again, the friends know that we can protect them, and the enemies are ready to move out of our way. And I think that's extremely important, and people need to understand that. Now, Obama is just the opposite. He wants us to be one of the boys. He wants us to be just like everybody else. That's why he's letting all these people with Ebola in. There's no reason why we should take on the African diseases, yet he should stop them when they get off the plane and not let them in. But we don't want some of these foreign ideas and diseases and people who don't believe in self-government. These people he's letting in and credentialing as new immigrants are not familiar with the whole concept of limited government. They look to the government for their savior and advisor and some organization to tell them what to do. We don't want that.
I want to bring up a point here, Phyllis, that you have made, and it's one that Al and I have talked about an awful lot. You say that the United States needs to terminate or renegotiate many of our trade agreements that pretend to promote free trade, mm-hmm. but actually are a cover for outsourcing good American jobs.
Well, yeah, if I said that, that's actually absolutely true. And the idea of giving new power to Obama by what is called fast track is just insane. He's already grabbed so much power that he doesn't deserve. But fast track is a plan to give Obama the power to go in a small locked room with foreigners and make deals that nobody else is a party to, and then enforce them and drop them on Congress and say this is what you have to. And why anybody would give him that more power, it just blows my mind.
Well, but let's look at it in the larger context. I know I understand we mention Obama a lot, but what about the Republicans that have been in cahoots with all this process, going back to the the 1970s with Nixon, and then a continuation of the policies we've lost millions and millions of jobs to overseas countries. Now, I understand the push. Everybody wants globalization now. They want a global government ultimately and a global economic system. But when you have a global...
The Chinese, they call it free trade, but
right.
The Chinese are cheating us coming and going.
Of course they are. They steal every patent. They break every law. They don't follow any of the trade laws, but yet they have most favored trade status. And that's a problem. And another problem is if Americans don't have jobs here, guess what? Guess who has to take care of them? The government.
Well, when the last one of these trade deals went through, Obama promised that it was going to create, I think it was 30,000 new jobs. Well, it did create 30,000 new jobs, but they were all in South Korea.
And I knew, right, and I knew we were screwed in NAFTA when Bush and Clinton both came out for it. George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton said NAFTA was great. The only person who said NAFTA wasn't so good was Reagan.
Hmm?
Who?
Ronald Reagan.
And Ross Perot.
Ross Perot.
Well, Reagan was for America, and that's what we need again.
So, what happened to Ross Perot? They crushed his candidacy. They passed NAFTA. All the jobs left, just like Ross Perot said. And then nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. Why is it, Phyllis, and I want to get your take, that nobody is speaking up, really, of the masses? I know there's you're speaking up and we're speaking up, but what is it? Is everyone just asleep watching 6 hours of TV being mesmerized? Or why is it no one else is speaking up to say enough is enough?
Well, because there's so much money on the other side, and people who present themselves as strategists and advisors are all on the take and getting so much money. The amount of money that was raked in by the so-called strategists who promote bipartisanship, that's one of their favorite topics, is they want to be bipartisan. We don't want to be bipartisan. We want the Republican Party to stand for the independence and superiority of America.
And not just that, though.
In the world, that's why everybody wants to come here.
But I want to ask you this though: where are we headed? I mean, is it too late to turn this around? That's my main question, or have we gone too far?
No, with Ronald Reagan, I believe it's morning in America, and we can still save our country. And in any event, if we've got children and grandchildren, it's our obligation to try.
What do you think,
and
Reagan?
We have to keep on trying.
Are we still? Is there still time? What do you think?
Well, I hate to say this, but I had a history teacher a long time ago that I admired very much, and it caused me to go into teaching history on a college level. And as early as the mid-1960s, Phyllis, this man who went on to get a Ph.D. and teach at a university in Southern Ohio, was telling us that when the decline and fall of the United States is written, the date that they will pick for the beginning of the decline and fall of this country is March the 4th of 1933. We began down what Ronald Reagan called a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. Can we stop it? Well, yeah, I do, but it's going to take a major occurrence and shift that hits a lot of people right in the face. And I don't know, Phyllis, am I out of line there?
We have to use the political system that we have.
Yeah.
As Rumsfeld said, when you go to war with the army you have, not the army you wish you had.
Right.
And we've got a system. We've got a two-party system. And you got to give up ideas of going third party because that's a dead-end road. The fight is in the Republican Party. And so I urge you to get your delegates squared away at the Republican Party so they can nominate a candidate who believes in America.
2016, they're going to Cleveland.
Right, and you need to read my book, A Choice Not an Echo, so you know all the crooked tricks that the big guys are going to try to pull on us and what they've done before. And it's just terribly important that everybody be involved.
They haven't been to Cleveland since 1936 when they nominated Alf Landon. Mm-hmm. Is there anything scary in that?
Yeah. Well, at least we kept him out of Las Vegas. That was one of them.
That's right. I'll tell you what. My goodness. Well, we do need to take another pause along our network line here, and Al and I, Phyllis, are enjoying this conversation immensely. We want to remind everyone that they are listening to the Florida Roundtable. It's a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks, and in the Orlando area, we are seen on Tough TV 38. Phyllis Schlafly, our special guest today, American political icon. 50 years ago, she wrote a bestseller called A Choice, Not an Echo. And today, there is an updated and expanded 50th anniversary edition of A Choice, Not an Echo. It has a brand new foreword by Ron Paul. It is from our friends at Reagan Publishing, available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and places like Amazon.com. Phyllis Schlafly, our special guest. I'm Reagan Smith.
I'm Al Spry.
And we'll continue in a moment. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks and in the Orlando area of Tough TV 38. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
Our very special guest this day is Phyllis Schlafly. An honor to have you with us. Her brand new, updated, and expanded 50th anniversary edition, A Choice, Not an Echo, with a foreword by Ron Paul from our friends at Reagan Publishing, available at all the fine bookstores around Florida and Amazon.com. And Phyllis, when I say that Al and I are honored to have you with us today, I don't think I'm putting that too strongly. You are an American political icon, and we appreciate all the time you're spending with us today.
Well, I've been there, done that, and I've been in those closed doors. I know what's going on, and that's what I'm trying to reveal in my new book, A Choice, Not an Echo.
Well, let's turn to Florida politics, and Jeb Bush, of course, the brother of George W. Bush, who we feel did a disservice to the American public in more than one level, now being continued by our friend Obama. And so why does Jeb want to get in? What is the main reason we shouldn't have him as the nominee for the Republican Party?
Well, the big guys believe in a British system called primogeniture. And that's a very un-American system. But that means when some big guy dies, all of his titles and property and money and everything go to the next guy in line, maybe the second son. Mm-hmm. And so we've had a series of Bushes, and I don't think we need any more Bushes.
Yeah. But what's the main reason why?
That's not our American way.
Tell me about Jeb. Tell me about why he's a bad choice, besides that reason.
Well, he's taken the wrong side of the two most volatile subjects in politics today. The Common Core thing that they're trying to put into our schools, and amnesty. And those are the two biggest issues at the grassroots. And the American people don't like amnesty, and they don't like Common Core. And unfortunately, Jeb has been lined up with both of those policies, which are very antagonistic to what most Americans want.
Well, let me ask you this, though. As far as the amnesty goes, Reagan granted amnesty to illegal.
But he admitted it was a mistake.
Okay.
And we also saw the result, because he promised us it was a one-time only. Mm-hmm. And, of course, once they granted amnesty, more people flooded in. So it was a failure.
All right.
So
well,
Reagan
nobody's perfect, I guess, as they say.
Reagan would never stick with a failure.
What about this Common Core? Tell briefly what this is and why so many of the Tea Party and conservatives are against it.
Well, it's been launched and injected into our system by a couple of $1 billion from Bill Gates, and it's a federalization of what's going on in the public schools, because what our kids are taught and not taught is just terribly important, and we believe in parental control. Parents should have something to say about it, but Common Core is supposed to override everything. And it's, a good example is Florida Governor Jindal. He was one of the 35 states who signed on to Common Core before anybody read it.
You mean Louisiana?
One day his kid came home with his arithmetic assignment, homework, and Jindal saw how nuts it is. It's teaching kids to draw pictures and other stupid things instead of memorizing the arithmetic. 2 plus 2 is 4, so that you're ready to move on to the next step in math. Mm-hmm. And so he has become an opponent of Common Core.
Well, before you go, who do you think should be the nominee for the GOP?
Well, somebody who is not chosen by the big boys. And I think the event in Des Moines this week was very helpful. Now, I wasn't there, but I had a lot of friends who were there. And they really thought that the one who did the best was Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin.
You like him better than Rand Paul as a choice? Or either one would be okay?
Yes, I don't think, yeah, right, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's shown he's a man of steel. He can resist and fight, and he's had such an immense great way of overcoming winning the elections against tremendous odds.
Phyllis, the clock has just about run out on us, and I do want to kind of recap here.
Now, you keep up to date by going to my website, eagleforum.org.
There you go, evilforum.org. And in the meantime, we want you to go out to your favorite bookstore or get to Amazon.com. It is an updated and expanded 50th anniversary edition, A Choice, Not an Echo, by Phyllis Schlafly, the foreword by Ron Paul, again from our friends at Regnery Publishing. And I just can't say enough how much we appreciate Phyllis Schlafly being with us, and we wish you good health and many more years. You don't mind if I tell the folks you are in your 90th year, and just as bright and well-spoken as ever I knew. So, Phyllis, thank you so much for being with us this day.
Well, you have a good day. God bless.
This is the Florida Roundtable. We hope that you are enjoying this half as much as Al and I are. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And if you'll stay put, we'll be back with a closing thought following these messages. This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
And let me not forget, we are also seen on Tough TV 38 in the Orlando area 3 times a week. And we're delighted to be with them as well. I enjoyed the conversation with Phyllis Schlafly.
Yes, she's a pistol.
She's just as sharp and opinionated as she ever was. You know, love her or hate her, there's never a doubt about where she stands.
And of course, I'd like to give a warm hello to, of course, Sue Lupia. We can't mention Will without
That's
Sue.
right.
Also
right.
with Tough TV. So thank you, Sue, for being as awesome as you are.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about medical marijuana before we go.
All right.
There's a GOP senator. Of course, the GOP runs the legislature in Florida, pretty much. Florida met under this bill filed by State Senator Jeff Brandes, St. Pete. A lot of old people in St. Pete. Remember that. Florida medical physicians would be allowed to prescribe medical-grade marijuana to needy patients under a major cannabis bill filed Monday by a top Republican state senator. They should have done this years ago, Reagan.
Yeah.
But you know why they're doing it now? Because last year there was an amendment that was going to be put into of course, our Constitution that got almost 60%. It almost passed to legalize medical marijuana. And so now the legislature is finally waking up. This would allow people who have specified serious medical conditions such as cancer, AIDS, or epilepsy, or a headache. No, I'm kidding. How about that last one? To receive and use medical marijuana if a doctor certifies its use. Patients would be limited to a 30-day supply, but then, of course, you can renew, I'm sure. So.
Yeah. Well, the same as any other medication that you would have now. You know, a doctor can give you a certain number of refills, and they would establish tight controls and all that sort of thing. So,
well, I think it's a nice thing that people are finally understanding that marijuana has incredible medicinal properties. I've been studying this subject for a while, and you know, when the amendment was first put in, I didn't want to be behind something that had dangers to it. But I mean, a good example is Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong had cancer, still alive, on Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah,
and all he did was use medical marijuana, I think, to cure himself. I don't think he used much else.
I really didn't think I would live long enough to see the day that, especially a state like Florida, would be actually talking about such a thing, and we are within the realm of it happening in our lifetime.
And we have gay marriage here in Florida too, so you know you never know what can happen.
You
the
stand
most
too
amazing
close to
thing.
the tree, and lightning is going to hit you. But it is it can be rather amazing. That is for certain. Well, it is just about time for us to run up the white flag here. One thing I didn't say very quickly when I talked about March the 4th of 1933 earlier on the show that was the day that Franklin Roosevelt became the President of the United States. And historians will argue that for a long time to come. But we'll make that point. Well, we want to say thank you for your time this day. We know you have lots of choices out there up and down the dial and on the internet, and who knows where in the world with Twitter and Twaddle-Doddle and everybody else that's out there. All kinds of things you can be doing. And we're delighted that you spend some time with the Florida Roundtable. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Al Spry.
We're going to talk about crime lines statewide, scheduled to be with us next week. Congressman Alan Grayson coming up. So we hope you will join us again for another edition of the Florida Roundtable.
You've been listening to Florida Roundtable, a weekly look at issues and problems of concern to Floridians from a state, national, and international perspective. Presented by the Florida News Network with your hosts, Reagan Smith and Al Spry. The views and opinions expressed during the preceding program are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's ownership, management, or sponsors of FNN. Your views and opinions are welcome. Address your card or letter to Florida Roundtable in care of Reagan Smith, 2500 Maitland Center Parkway, Suite 407, Maitland, Florida, 32751. Or you may email reagansmith@fnnonline.com. Thank you for listening, and please join us again next week for another edition of Florida Roundtable.